Imagine losing the love of your life, and before the dirt has even settled on his grave, your stepchildren march into your living room and demand you leave the house you've called home for nearly 40 years. That's exactly what happened to me. But what they didn't know was that their father and I had planned for this day, and when the truth came out, it left them speechless, empty-handed, and begging for mercy. Imagine standing at your husband's funeral, your heart shattered, your hands trembling, and before the night even ends, the very people who should have comforted you, your stepchildren, stand in your kitchen and tell you to pack your bags. That's what happened to me. The night my husband was laid to rest, I discovered the cruel truth. They never saw me as family, only as an obstacle. But what they didn't know was that the woman they dismissed as powerless was about to become the one person they could never defeat. If you've ever been underestimated, betrayed, or treated as though you didn't matter, this story will hit home. Stay with me until the end, because what begins as heartbreak turns into a revenge so complete, it left everyone speechless. And before we dive in, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more incredible real-life stories, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. My name is Rosalind Carter, and I am 64 years old. For 38 years, I was married to Tom, a man who filled my life with laughter, stability, and love. When he passed away, I thought the hardest part of that day would be losing him. I was wrong. The hardest part was discovering, just hours later, what his children truly thought of me. The funeral was a gray afternoon in Boston. Stained glass windows painted soft colors across the pews as friends and neighbors filled the church. Tom was deeply respected, the kind of man people trusted with both business and friendship. Lucas, his eldest son, stood at the pulpit and gave a careful eulogy, reminiscing about childhood summers by the lake. Mariah, his daughter, read a poem with trembling hands, her voice breaking as she spoke of loss. Even Valerie, Tom's first wife, managed a polite, distant tribute. I sat in the front row, wearing the navy dress Tom always said made my eyes brighter. To most people, I must have looked like the quiet, grieving widow, holding her dignity together in the middle of heartbreak. But not everyone looked at me with sympathy. From across the church, one pair of eyes followed me, with something sharper than sorrow. Brooke, Ethan's wife, my daughter-in-law. Her smile carried no grief, no comfort, only calculation. After the service, everyone gathered at the house. Guests admired the antiques, ran their fingers across framed photographs, speculated quietly about the worth of Tom's study. I stood by the kitchen doorway, nodding, thinking, accepting murmured condolences. But what I noticed most wasn't their kindness, it was the silence in between. The way Brooke leaned close to Mariah. The way Lucas glanced at Ethan. The way Ethan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. When the last car pulled away and the house fell quiet, I turned to load the dishes, thinking I might finally have a moment alone with my grief. Instead, I heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate. I turned to see Brooke standing there with her arms crossed, and beside her, Lucas and Mariah, with Ethan lingering behind them like a shadow. Brooke's words cut like glass. "This house is far too large for you. It's time you started looking for a more suitable place." The kitchen seemed to tilt. My voice was barely a whisper. "You're telling me to leave?" Brooke's smile was thin, her eyes glinting. "We're telling you to be realistic." I looked at their faces. People I had once welcomed into my home. People I had loved, raised, supported for years. And now, they stood united, treating me like an intruder. I turned back to the sink, my hands trembling, and gave them the only word they expected least from me. "Okay." I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I didn't even raise my voice. That night, while Brooke and the others laughed in the living room, dividing rooms and planning their future as if I were already gone, I quietly packed 2 suitcases. Just 2. I left the jewelry in the velvet box, the artwork on the walls, the designer dresses still in their covers. Let them think they had taken everything. Let them believe I was leaving empty-handed. When the taxi pulled up, I asked the driver to drop me at a modest hotel near Logan Airport. At the front desk, I signed the register under my maiden name, Rosalind Carter. To the clerk, I was just another tired woman traveling alone. Invisible. Perfect. That night, as I sat on the edge of the bed listening to the hum of planes overhead, grief pressed hard against me. But something else pressed harder. Something colder. Sharper. More deliberate. They had mistaken me for powerless, and that mistake was going to cost them dearly. The very next morning, I made my first phone call to Daniel Knox. Tom's attorney, yes, but more importantly mine. His voice was steady, kind, touched with genuine sorrow. "I'm sorry for your loss, Rosalind," he said. "How soon can we meet?" I asked. There was no hesitation. "Tomorrow morning. Tell me where to come. You need privacy." Most people assume my life began when I married Tom. That I was just his second wife, dependent on his income, enjoying a comfort I hadn't earned. What they didn't know, what even Tom's own children never cared to ask, was that I had a life long before him. A life that taught me independence. My first husband died suddenly when I was 38, leaving me not only grief, but also the careful portfolio he had built. Insurance. Stocks. And most importantly, a crumbling warehouse in Manhattan's Hudson Square. Everyone else saw an eyesore, a skeleton of broken windows and old brick. I saw possibility. With patience, the right contractors, and a bit of risk, I turned it into loft apartments just as the neighborhood began to change. Within 10 years, the rent from those lofts covered more than most people earned in a lifetime. That warehouse became the foundation of an empire. From there, I learned quickly. I studied markets, asked questions, invested carefully, diversified wisely. By the time I married Tom, I was already financially independent. But I let him take the spotlight. He liked being the provider, the man with answers. And I was content to let him. To his children, this looked like idleness. They saw me as a woman who had married into comfort. They never knew about the contracts I negotiated, the lawyers and accountants who answered to me, the monthly reports I studied late at night. Their blindness served me well. And now, with Tom gone, it was about to become their downfall. The next morning, I sat across from Daniel in a quiet cafe. He carried a leather briefcase, his expression serious. After we ordered coffee, he leaned in. "Tell me everything." I described the kitchen confrontation. Brooke's smirk, Lucas and Mariah standing like a jury, Ethan silent but complicit. Daniel's jaw tightened. "They have no idea, do they?" I shook my head. "None." Daniel opened his briefcase and slid folders across the table. "Rosalind, your husband transferred nearly everything into your name over a decade ago. Properties, accounts, corporate interests. The paper trail is clean. They can challenge, but they'll lose." Later that day, I met Olivia Park at the bank. She assumed I was there for survivor benefits until I laid Daniel's documents on her desk. Her eyes widened. I had no idea. "That's the point," I said softly. Together, we updated beneficiaries, confirmed titles, and secured every account beyond dispute. I wasn't rushing. Not yet. Brooke and the others were busy moving into what they thought was theirs. I wanted them comfortable, careless, convinced they had won. Only then would I remind them that assumptions can be the most expensive mistake of all. By midweek, moving trucks pulled into my driveway. From across the street, I watched from a rental car with tinted windows. Brooke directed movers like a general, pointing toward Tom's study, waving toward the bedrooms, already replacing my presence with hers. Lucas carried boxes of files, puffed up with importance. Mariah inspected the china cabinet like she was shopping in a store. Ethan hovered behind, uncertain but obedient. Inside, I knew they were rifling through Tom's desk. But all they would find were outdated tax records, old contracts, and notes from his modest consulting firm. Nothing about my portfolio. Nothing about Carter Holdings. Nothing about the millions. That night, my phone buzzed with a message from Ethan. "Hope you're settled. Brooke is organizing Dad's office. We'll need you to sign some forms." I let the screen go dark without answering. Silence, I knew, could be louder than words. And soon, they would discover just how loud mine could be. 2 weeks after Tom's funeral, the mahogany-paneled office of Anderson and Knox smelled faintly of old paper and fresh polish. The children sat in a row, Brooke in the middle like a queen presiding over her court. Lucas tapped his foot impatiently, Mariah scrolled her phone, and Ethan avoided my eyes. I walked in late, deliberately. I wore black, but not morning black, sharp, commanding black. A tailored suit, gold cufflinks, my hair swept up in a bun. Not the grieving widow they imagined, but the executor of fate itself. Daniel greeted me warmly and gestured to the seat beside him. Brooke shot me a look of disdain. "You actually came," she muttered, loud enough for the room to hear. I smiled without warmth. I wouldn't miss this. Mr. Anderson, the senior partner, opened a leather-bound folder. His voice carried the weight of finality. "This is the last will and testament of Thomas Whitaker." The room stilled. He read aloud. "To my beloved wife, Rosalind Carter Whitaker, I leave the totality of my estate, including all properties, financial holdings, and corporate shares. To my children, I leave the knowledge that the woman they dismissed as insignificant was, in truth, the foundation of my peace and success." The silence that followed was delicious. Brooke's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Lucas leaned forward. "That can't be right." Mariah's phone slipped from her hand. Ethan paled, whispering, "Dad?" Mr. Anderson continued, unshaken. "This will is dated 7 years ago, notarized and witnessed. It supersedes all prior versions." Brooke shot to her feet, her chair clattering back. "This is fraud. She manipulated him. He would never." "Sit down, Brooke," I said calmly. My voice sliced through her hysteria. "Your father was a brilliant man. He made his choices with clear eyes and a clear mind. The truth is simple. He trusted me, not you." Lucas pounded a fist on the polished table. "You don't deserve it. You married him for money." I leaned forward, my tone measured but lethal. "I didn't need Tom's money. Long before I met him, I built my own. While you were busy running up credit card bills and pretending to be important, I was negotiating contracts worth millions. I let him provide because he enjoyed it. But make no mistake, I never depended on him. And he knew it. Their faces, shocked, angry, crumbling, were worth every silent night I had endured. When the meeting ended, Daniel escorted me outside. The children trailed after, spitting threats about lawsuits and investigations. But Daniel merely raised an eyebrow. "They don't have a case," he assured me. And he was right. The following week, I returned to the mansion. A locksmith had already changed the codes. Movers waited by the gate. Brooke stormed out, her voice shrill. "You can't just throw us out." I handed her a sealed envelope. Inside was a formal eviction notice, signed by the court. "You have 72 hours, I said softly. Lucas cursed under his breath. Mariah burst into tears. Ethan looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. There was shame in his eyes, but also something softer. Regret, perhaps. I didn't linger. As movers carried out their designer luggage and hastily packed boxes, I walked through the house room by room. The study still smelled faintly of Tom's cologne. The garden shimmered in late sunlight. It wasn't just a house. It was a legacy. And it was mine. On the third day, when the last car pulled away, silence fell like a blessing. For the first time in weeks, I sat in Tom's favorite chair, a glass of wine in hand, and let myself breathe. Revenge didn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it came with a signature, a key turning in a lock, and the sound of a door closing on those who thought they'd already won. In the weeks that followed, word spread quickly. Brooke, Lucas, and Mariah scrambled to find footing in a world where their last name no longer carried weight. Creditors called. Bank accounts froze. Invitations to society, dinners stopped arriving. Their world of entitlement crumbled faster than they ever imagined. And Ethan's sweet, conflicted Ethan showed up one evening at my door. He stood there with no arrogance, no entitlement, just a man stripped of illusions. "I'm sorry," he said simply. His voice cracked under the weight of sincerity. For a long moment, I studied him. He wasn't like the others, not fully. But forgiveness isn't something I hand out freely anymore. I let him in for tea, but not into my trust. Trust is earned, and his ledger with me was still stained. I began to rebuild life on my own terms. I hired new staff who respected boundaries. I donated in Tom's name to charities that mattered to us both. I traveled, revisiting places we once dreamed of, carrying him with me in memory, but never chained by grief. One morning, as I stood by the garden where Tom had planted roses every spring, a thought settled into my heart. Sometimes revenge isn't about destruction. Sometimes it's about survival. About proving that those who underestimate you only set the stage for their own downfall. And for me, survival had turned into something far greater, freedom. So, to those listening, never let anyone define your worth. Never let someone else's dismissal write your story. Strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, waits, and strikes when the world least expects it. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength, and subscribe for more stories where justice finds its voice. Because sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one holding all the power. This was Rosalind's story. Thank you for walking beside me through it.